A huge victory for free speech and a huge bummer for censorship-happy dweebs at the White House. That's you, Jessica. The White House, a federal judge, has temporarily blocked Biden administration officials from contacting social media companies. It comes after the White House pressured big tech to block or remove content they disliked.
The major platforms have a responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19, vaccinations, and elections.
They have to do more to reduce the misinformation that's out there.
We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation. It shouldn't come as any surprise that we're in regular touch with social media platforms.
On COVID misinformation, what's your message to platforms like Facebook? They're killing people.
And the media is going to bat for the White House's censorship agenda.
The government has to have the right to have its own free speech, to push back when they see things on social media they think are dangerous.
This is one of the most aggressive, far-reaching rulings you'll ever see. What this judge is purporting to do is to micromanage, really, the day-to-day interactions between essentially the entire executive branch, all these agencies that are listed as defendants, and the leading social media companies.
It's not as though the FBI has been going in and saying, hey, take down this post, hey, take down this post. That's what they're alleging, but there's just not a lot of evidence to support that.
Judge. The judge built a case, and he showed that every example of bias went in one direction. And we talked about this before, whether it's about COVID or the laptop, it always seems to go in a way that benefits the left and harms the right.
The judge identified, you're right, COVID, masking, lockdowns, lab leak theory, opposition to the validity of the 2020 campaign. Let me tell you something. This case is huge. This is a very significant case that has the ability, of course, to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. The issue is very clear. Whether or not the government has the right to basically suppress free speech. And they did it repeatedly. They did it during all of those things I referenced. From the beginning of time, people have disagreed on what is true and what isn't true. All of a sudden, this government comes in and says, we are the arbiters of what's true, and don't you dare say it if it's not true, and we will suppress you if it's not true. I had my own tweets and my own Facebook postings suppressed and removed. It is a bottom line where this White House is against the decision. KJP says, we don't agree with it. But this is the government who's trying to decide for the people what we should say, what we should read, what we should think, and what we can talk to each other about it. And kudos goes to people like Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Bhattacharya, the doctors who put their reputations and their neck out there, because now we find out that the government, who's so concerned about disinformation, was wrong. They were wrong about everything they were shutting us down about. And so now the damage has been done. And 5 years later, people are saying, doctors have been trashed. Where do I go to get my reputation back? Where do I go to be able to identify myself as a credible physician or a credible person? And this was election interference at the highest level with the suppression of the laptop, which the FBI knew months before and said that it was Hunter's laptop. They then are coming out, Homeland Security and Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, saying, we don't know if it's true, so it's Russian disinformation. This administration is one of the most corrupt administrations we have seen in the history of this country. And this decision will bring it to a head.
Jessica, while the judge was talking, you were nodding along in total agreement.
Don't tell the audience. I knew it was a single shot.
So, but then, a higher ground, I bet we could all agree on is this is the problem when you talk about disinformation or misinformation. The person who judges it, who is the person who gets to judge that? And that person ends up being the one who suppresses it. So that's why you saw it all from one direction, because you guys happen to be in power. That would switch if a Republican was. Isn't that the danger?
It is the danger, but there's also a lot of danger embedded in this judge's decision because he doesn't acknowledge the fact that Donald Trump was president for the beginning of COVID. When the lab leak theory came out, he was in power, and his administration talked with the social media companies the same way that a Democrat would. So this judge made it seem as if there was no government censorship until January 21st, 2021. as if Trump, who, by the way, has
the greatest president ever.
I'm coming to that. I was going to start with that he's someone who openly went after the social media companies constantly.
Yes.
And when the Matt Taibbi files came out, I know we talked about this, and he included things that the Biden team had asked about. And you need to be clear, it's the Biden team because it was a campaign, not the administration, talking about please take down the photos of Hunter Biden's penis, you know, it's being blurred out and this or that. And then we get to the testimony where they came before all those committees on Capitol Hill. And we find out that Trump was actually asking for people to be thrown off Twitter, like Chrissy Teigen, for calling him a dirty name, which I can't say on television, but you all know what she put out there. So it just doesn't add up. If you want to have an honest conversation about the Orwellian aspects of what a government can do, that's fine. But dates matter, and it matters.
This is the honest conversation.
Well, I think it's only maybe going to be me talking about the dates of this, and also the Hunter Biden laptop. That was in October. That had nothing to do with the Biden administration taking over, unless you believe that everyone who works in the government is evil and is a secret liberal and wants to make sure that
secret about
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? They're all Republicans.
No, wait a minute. What are you saying, October with the laptop?
October 2020 was when the laptop story was censored. Joe Biden was a candidate for president and not the president.
You admit it was censored.
It was
But
censored.
your whole thing is that it's Orwellian, and in 1984, it's the government.
To benefit Joe Biden when the FBI did it. The FBI was the one who was telling everyone not to publish it when the FBI were the very same people who had verified it.
So again, it's every high-ranking law enforcement official in this country is against Donald Trump and the Republicans. You know, just to get that straight.
Well, you would probably agree that Donald Trump was contentious against most of them. So it's not all that crazy to think perhaps they had a bias back against him. I mean, many people in your party, and I can't say you specifically because I've been blown up, my memory doesn't stretch that far, but many people in your party were very adamantly loud about how Donald Trump was against his own intelligence community time after time and against his own DOJ, or put Bill Barr in place just so he could control the DOJ and tell them what to do. So if Donald Trump needs somebody to tell the DOJ what to do, that tells me that they're not exactly his friends in the interim. But this is what I'll tell you. I really don't care if it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden or anybody in between. Go after every single person in the government, regardless of administration, that told social media companies they had to take things down that were true or put things up that weren't. Like, I don't know, it's only going to take 15 days to slow the spread. The vax will prevent spread. Mask stop particulate spray. Wearing rubber gloves helps. It wasn't from a lab. We didn't fund the research. Andrew Cuomo's doing a good job. All these things that they told us were really great and we needed to believe. And if we didn't believe, they were going to ruin our lives, and they proceeded to ruin our lives. If it happened under Trump, if it happened under Biden, go after every single one of them. And to the very least, maybe the cowards that want to control our lives by lying to us and manipulating us will resign and take their pension. I don't care necessarily if it goes to Biden. I don't need to sit here and make Biden the bad guy, because hopefully people are seeing what his policies do.
I need to make Biden the bad guy. That's happening. It was Anthony Blinken. It was Jim Comey. Are you telling me Jim Comey was on Donald Trump's side? He tried to set him up for this whole thing.
Jim Comey is almost single-handedly responsible for Hillary Clinton losing the election.
You think so?
I do.
The Americans found her to be the most untrustworthy candidate they had ever seen.
Dana, don't you find it strange how there's been a flip on the sides of you will have conservatives who criticize tech for, I don't know, not. Let me put it this way. The right used to want them to cooperate, and the left used to want them not to cooperate, and now it's flipped.
Yes, and so now you have conservatives defending big tech from the government.
Right.
And the government is, there's a part in the case where the judge says, it notes that social media companies were terrified of political retaliation if they didn't comply with dictates. And we know that from the Twitter files and also from Mark Zuckerberg's interviews, saying that when the government calls and says, we need, this is a problem, then you listen to them because you are concerned about that. I thought it was interesting that the New York Times quoted disinformation experts. I don't know if there's any less credible people at the moment on disinformation experts, and they're so worried. But I do like that this is getting us back to principles, because Trump and Biden will be no longer in the picture in a few years. So then in terms of in the presidency. So then you have this issue of what is the role of government when it comes to social media companies, because that's not going to stop. And the White House talked openly about our social media partners. And the government is also going to need to talk to them, though. If you remember, there's been a lot of criminal cases. We need in that phone. We need to know exactly who was he calling, when was he calling, where were they, who are the other people they're talking to. There are anti-terrorism tactics that you want to use in order to have communication. So this case is not the end, but I'll be very curious to see how the Biden administration appeals this, because they're in a bit of a box.
They certainly are. A box full of cocaine.
With a My Little Pony sticker on it.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.